Hello again, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Andrea Radke, and I am the owner and operator of Lion Dog African Safaris. I am presenting here on video a series of informational sessions talking about a tour to Africa. Lion Dog African Safaris is a tour operator offering private guided tours to Africa. And we work with African suppliers directly. So there's no middleman, no big wholesale company, selling me a trip to Africa, which I then in turn sell to you. No, I am customizing every single tour to Africa for you, and you can decide where you want to go and what you want to do on your bucket list item trip. In order to make a good decision of what you want to do, I present you these informational sessions. Last time we talked about logistics of game safaris, which includes different venues like lodges, tented camps, camping, etc. Just also a difference between fly-in safaris versus drive-in safaris. We talked about safari guides, as well as what to discuss with your friends if you want to go on a tour with your friends. So if you want more information on all those logistical items, check out the module from last week. It's on the YouTube channel, Lion Dog African Safaris, or you can also send me an email and I will send you the link directly to the video, and you can check it out and learn more about logistics. Today, we will talk about game safari areas. There are three main areas that we typically use for game safaris, and I will also talk about two more areas that are not the main areas, but they are, in my opinion, worthwhile talking about. And I've sent people there, and I've been there myself, and I really just enjoy those safari areas as well. I will share my screen with you so you can see some images and have a little bit more information on some slides. So just give me a minute here for me to share my screen. This will be just a minute. Hold on a second. This. Okay, so you should be able to see this presentation now. So this is our cover page. I use that all the time because I just love that area. It is in Tanzania. It's the Great Rift Valley Wall, which runs pretty much through the entire continent and is splitting the continent in half over many, many millions of years. So we're not quite there yet. So Africa is still intact, but this is the wall that kind of runs all the way through Africa. So the best safari parks and regions in Africa, we came up with a definition, and unfortunately you won't be able to see the entire text box at the bottom there, but I'll read it to you. So the criteria for the very best safari parks and regions in Africa is that there should be a high concentration of free roaming and diverse wildlife living in their natural habitat. They should be removed from development, and they should be in a relatively safe and peaceful jurisdiction. So if we apply these criteria, we will end up at three main areas where we typically go on safari to, and that is the OKAVANGO Delta in Botswana. You can see that on the map. The Northern Park Circuit in Tanzania, and also the Southern Park Circuit in Tanzania as well. And I will talk a little bit more about all three of these areas. You may have heard about them, you may have never heard about them. So pay some good attention and you will learn a lot more. So the first area is the OKAVANGO Delta and also the CHOBE National Park in Botswana. Botswana, I refer to as a part of Southern Africa. I usually draw the line between East and Southern Africa. And Zambia, as well as Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa are part of Southern Africa. So Botswana is in Southern Africa. The OKAVANGO Delta is in the northern part of Botswana, and so is the CHOBE National Park. The more attractive area in this part is the OKAVANGO Delta, because it is a very, very unique safari area, and it is shaped, I want to say, because of the OKAVANGO Delta. The delta itself is kind of like almost a natural phenomenon. There are two inland deltas in Africa, with the Okavango Delta being the smaller of the two. What it is a river, the Okavango River, that originates in the highlands of Angola, and it flows through Angola and a little bit through Namibia. Here, this part, the light blue part, is Namibia's Caprivi Strip. So the river comes from Angola, from the dark blue area, runs through the Caprivi Strip, then enters into Botswana, where it starts making some swamps and a wider area, and then it empties out in a depression of the Kalahari. A lot of the area down here in Botswana, spilling over into Namibia and also down into South Africa, is the Kalahari. People refer to it as a desert, but it's actually not a desert. It doesn't, it's not dry enough. It receives too much rainfall to technically be considered a desert, but people know it as a desert. It is a fairly dry area, and there is a depression in that dry area where the Okavango River empties out into that depression, and that forms the delta. Now you see some different colors as a darker green and a lighter green, and that is because there is always, or most of the time, some permanent water there, which is the green area. So these are the perennial wetlands. So there's always some water, some channels. It may not always be as big as you see it there, but there will always be some water in the channels, and it will recede with the dry season. And then when it starts raining, it takes quite a bit of rain in Angola, sometimes early in the year, and then the water becomes more and more, the river becomes bigger and bigger, and eventually it will start flooding the entire delta, and the water will kind of move forward into those lighter green areas and make swamps and like all around it. So in the high water season, which is not necessarily the rainy season, but it's the high water season, the water will be quite high. This is what is happening right now in the Okavango Delta. So April into May, the delta will receive a lot of water coming from Angola. Typically, the rains stop in about March, late March, early April, but the water keeps flowing into the delta, flooding it, making it quite wet and with a lot of water. So you want to pay attention to what time of the year you want to visit the delta, because if there is so much water there, all you really end up doing is water-based safari. So on a boat, somewhere over the swamps, looking for animals, in the distance on the dry land. That's not ideal. You want to go and see the wildlife in the Okavango Delta in the dry season, and that is also true for the CHOBE National Park, which is just north of the Okavango Delta up here. So you want to go there in the dry season in order to take advantage of all the beautiful landscapes, not just the water, because they may, if you see a really good offer on the internet, Okavango Delta for a low price, that's probably going to be in the wet season or when the delta is high with water. You end up somewhere on an island and doing water-based safari all day long. That doesn't give you all the beautiful views of the delta that you could have if you would go in the dry season. Dry season is considered starting in around June, going all the way to October. Now there's some better times there, which is August and September, and there's some not ideal time there, which is June and July, which is really, really cold. So it is the dry area and the dry season, and you can observe a lot of animals, but you also have to take a nice warm sweater and a coat and a toque and a scarf with you, because it can be quite cold. October, on the other hand, which is kind of the end of the high season, can be very hot, and that is because we're nearing the wet season. November is a shoulder season. It's quite nice still to go. It can be warmer, but we are expecting a few rain showers which cool off the days in the afternoon. So if you're not scared of rain, if you don't mind a little bit of rain for an hour or so in the afternoon, and then usually the sun comes out after that again, then it's a good idea to also go in November if that fits your time schedule. The best months to go into the OKAVANGO Delta are August and September. Now, this area is the most pristine and most beautiful area to go to for a game safari because it is very, very well protected, and it is somewhat limited accessible. That's because there's some restrictions put on the Delta as of the amount of people or the number of people that can go and visit there. That makes it also the most expensive area to go on a safari to. There are two different areas. You can see this purple line here, kind of going through the area here, making like a closed area. Inside this fence, which is not a fence, it's just kind of like a marking. This is the public concession of the OKAVANGO Delta, where you can go on a safari, you can go on a day trip, you can go on a self-drive, you can go on a camping safari, all those kind of things. Those are the public concession. They are kind of busier than the private concessions. The private concessions are on the outside of this area. So they're all around here, all the way over here, even further up in the north. The difference in the private concession is that there's only a limited number of beds available per day. So it is very restricted. That makes it a fairly intimate area of safari because you don't have that many vehicles out on safari. You only have a certain number of people allowed in that area, and that makes it very, very, how can I say, exclusive. Yeah, it's a very exclusive area to do safari at. Comes with its price because it is kind of further away from the main area, so that means all supplies need to be taken in, you know, on either private flights or those kind of things, which makes it more expensive. And also the government puts some more fees on it, bag levies, and all, which go towards conservation. So the average pricing in high season going into these areas on safari would be a budget of about $1,000 to $1,500 per person per day. That's in the concessions that I typically utilize. There are areas that can be even more expensive. We don't necessarily use those. They are high luxury areas with, you know, all kinds of bells and whistles, which I don't necessarily think is necessary to have like a wonderful safari in the Botswana OKAVANGO Delta. But they are available if you want to get really spoiled, like with your private attendant in your room, etc. Then we can definitely utilize these areas. But typically we use the concessions that are in the $1,000 to $1,500 per person per day cost area. We can mitigate this cost by staying in the public concessions inside this area here, where we can mitigate those costs to about $800 to $1,200 per person per day. Kind of depends a little bit on the season. Like I said, November can be the cost can be mitigated in November. We can also, if you go back to the module that I presented to you last time, we can also mitigate these costs by doing a drive-in safari bivouac camping, and that would be in the public concession. So we would start in Mount, and then you would have your private game viewing vehicle, you would have your campy and your guide, and you would go on a safari on the outskirts here of the public concession. You would likely make your way up into the Savuti area here of the CHOBE National Park on a drive-in safari, changing your venues every other day or so, and then find your way all the way up to Kazani. So those bivouac tenting drive-in safaris go probably by about $600 to $800 per person per day. We can mix them up with some tents, some permanent tented camps in the area we can utilize, or you can also do the entire trip bivouac camping. It's usually about 6 nights we use to travel from Mount all the way up to Kazani with your game drives and safaris here in the Okavango Delta, as well as in the Chobe National Park. The Chobe National Park is mostly a public concession, so people can go there for daytime safaris. Very, very busy here in the northern area around Kazani. Less busy in this area up here, which is called the Linyanti, because the Chobe, the river, the Chobe River is called the Chobe River here, but west of Lake Liambezi, it's called the Linyanti River. Same ecosystem, same kind of water. Flowing through the Linyanti, through Lake Liambezi, and then into Chobe, and then eventually the Chobe River meets up with the Zambezi River. So it's just the same river with different names. Anyways, this northern area here, it's called the Linyanti area, which is a fly-in safari area. There are no roads up there. It's very secluded. It's very remotely placed, and it's quite a nice area to do some safari there. You can fish on the Chobe River, can go fishing here. You can do water-based safari, can do land-based safari in this area as well. Same is the matter in the Okavango Delta. So you can do all kinds of safari. You can do game drives, so land-based safari. You can do water-based safari, nighttime safari. You can do walking safaris, etc. There's also an option to do a canoe safari, which is typically done up here in the Zelinda Spillway, where you pack a canoe with some tents and supplies, etc., and guides, of course, and to go along this channel on a canoe. We also do horse riding in the Okavango Delta as well as in Chobe. So if you want to go on a few days horse riding safari, you can do that there also. This is what it looks like. Some land-based safari here in the open-sided vehicles, as we're using the lodges and camps there for our game driving vehicles. That was explained in the last module. We do some Mokoro rides on the channels here and on the swamps in the Okavango Delta. And we also can offer some houseboating, which are typically done on the Chobe River again up here in the northern part. So that's a good way to kind of escape those busy areas on land around Kazani here by staying on the river in a houseboat. We used to say, we used to call it houseboating. Nowadays we call it river safari. It sounds a lot more fancy. It's kind of the same thing. So you go onto a boat and you spend your days and nights on the Chobe River. You have tender boats to take out for some wet safaris, etc. There's an area where you can visit a cultural village on the Namibia side of the river, and you can also do some game drives on the Botswana side of the river. Typically, that's done on your last day when you disembark the boat and get back to Kazani town to go on your next adventure or take a flight out of the area. So we usually do the Okavango Delta and Chobe Linyanti area on probably about 4 or 5 nights, because you don't need to spend your entire time on safari in this area. So 2 nights typically, sometimes 3 if it's in the budget on the Okavango Delta, and then another 2 nights or so on Chobe. That will end you up in Kazani. And from Kazani, it's just a hop and a skip when you can get to Victoria Falls. So those 3 areas can easily be combined in the Okavango Delta. Just to sum it up again, the Okavango Delta is a very, very good, probably the best safari area in the world, where you can find a high diversity of animals, lots of animals, high density of elephants, all the kinds of predators. You can find wild dogs there, and just like wonderful, wonderful safari days with a low number of people in the private concessions and a higher number of people in the public concessions. Costs range between 800 to 1,500 plus per person per day US funds. All right, so now we're going to go to the next area, and that will be the Northern Park Circuit. So if you look back when I said the Okavango Delta is the best safari area in the world, the Northern Park Circuit we often refer to as the best bang for your buck, because you can find, or you will see, all the general African wildlife in the Northern Park Circuit in Tanzania for a fraction of the cost. Let's look at it a little bit more in detail. So the Northern Park Circuit is a combination of multiple parks in the northern area of Tanzania. And the most visited area of that would be the Serengeti National Park. Everybody has heard about the Serengeti. We talk about the Great Migration, which lives in the Serengeti, and lots of people that want to go on a safari have at least once heard about the Serengeti National Park. So we'll talk about the Serengeti. There is another park close by. It's called the Tarangire National Park. Quite a neat little park, very, very close to Serengeti, and often combined with the Serengeti visitation. Also very close by is the Ngorongoro crater, one of the natural world wonders in the world. Very close on the outskirts of the Serengeti also. So those parks can all be visited in one combination, so to speak. There's also Lake Manyara National Park very close by. We don't go to Lake Manyara that much anymore. There's just not anything additionally to see that you wouldn't have already seen in the Serengeti or in Tarangire. We used to say that Lake Manyara is the hotspot for tree climbing lions, and there are tree climbing lions there, but we can also find them in the Serengeti, and we can also find them in Tarangire. It's just a behavior that the lions have adapted to because of the prey they go after, because of the bugs when they bother them really on the ground. They have learned to escape those bugs and climb into the trees, or look from up there to see if there's any prey around, etc. So this is not the only area where you would find tree climbing lions. Now you also see the Masai Mara noted here on the map. The Masai Mara, and I'll show you that in one of the next slides, is an extension of the Serengeti National Park. So it's the same ecosystem, but it spills over the border and into Kenya. I'll show you that on one of the next slides. So the Masai Mara is the same ecosystem as the Serengeti. It's just over the border into Kenya, and that's why it has a different name. So people that say, oh, I want to see the Great Migration in the Masai Mara, they probably don't know that the Great Migration is actually in the Serengeti most of the time, and only for a few weeks, the migration also spills over into Kenya, into the Masai Mara. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the next slide. So what all can we do in the Northern Park Circuit? We can do game safari in the Serengeti and the Tarangire National Park. We can do balloon safari over the Serengeti, which is a really neat way of seeing some wildlife and also the beautiful ecosystem of the Serengeti. We can also do it in Tarangire, but it's mostly done in Serengeti. We can do some cultural visits there as well, and other activities. The main reason why we would go to the Northern Park Circuit is for game safari, and that is mostly done here in the Serengeti, as I mentioned before. And then just for comparison, the Ndutu conservation area is just outside of the Serengeti and is typically visited with the Serengeti. So it's almost like a part of the Serengeti. It's not really, but it is so close by that we don't necessarily distinguish between the two. But here, this little dot is the Ngorongoro crater, so quite close by. And the Ngorongoro crater is a sanctuary within a sanctuary. It used to be an active volcano many, many thousands of years ago, like thousands and thousands of years ago. It was an active volcano until it collapsed, and it made a caldera of about 20 kilometers in diameter, and there is a good amount of wildlife down in the crater that never leaves the crater. So we'll find buffalo, we'll find wildebeest, we'll find eland, we find lions, we find elephants. We do not find giraffes in the crater because they cannot live down there. There's not enough food for them down there. But most of the other wildlife we find, like hyenas and baboons, all kinds of animals, hippos in the crater. And That's also the area in Tanzania where you can find rhino. There are black rhinos down in the Ngorongoro crater, and with a little bit of luck, you would be able to see the rhinos. They're often far away. They're also heavily protected. And they live in an area where there's no roads going in there to protect them from poaching and accessibility. But sometimes they come closer to the center of the crater, and you can actually see them. Last time I was there in February 2020, we saw a total of 6 black rhinos in the crater. So quite neat. Not very, very close, but somewhat close. I could take a fuzzy picture, but that's better than nothing. So if you're looking for a rhino in Tanzania, the crater would be the area where you would find them. We do cultural visits in Tanzania as well. We do visit those folks here on the top left of your screen. They are called the Hazabi people. They live in around the Lake Eyasi area, so here where this red dot is. And we can visit them for half a day, for a few hours in the morning is the best time to go see them, especially if you would want to go hunting with them. They are still living the traditional ways. They've been living like 10,000s of years, and they still hunt with bow and arrow. And if you're up for it, you can go with them. Take some old running shoes along, take some old clothes along, because you'll be running through the bush, and some of the bushes have some thorns. So I don't want you to ruin your safari suit. Take an old shirt and an old pair of shorts, and then you can go hunting with the Hazabi. They hunt for smaller mammals, like little bush bucks, porcupines. They hunt squirrels, anything they deem edible and consumable during the day for their meals, because that's their source of food. They go hunting pretty much every day for their food, and you can go along with them. And you will, if you don't want to go hunting with them, you stay with the youth in the village, and you can meet with the women, and they show you how to make fire and tell you a little bit more about their day-to-day life, etc. And you can spend a few hours with them there. In the same area, there is another traditional tribe. It's called the Datoga. They are pastoral, so they live off their livestock. They have goats and cattle, etc. They are very well known for their metal work. They make pots and pans. They make some jewelry. They make arrow tips, etc. And you can see how they do that and how they make them. And also, you could buy some, trinkets or some souvenirs or some jewelry to take home. And this experience is a very, very good experience, very respectful to the people, and very gentle, I want to say, which is something that is really important nowadays, talking about cultural visits or visitations, because a lot of these cultural visitations nowadays are kind of spoiled by, people wanting to make business, wanting to sell their stuff, etc. Which when you visit the Hazabi and Datoga, that is not the case. It's a very, very authentic visitation, and 99% of the people that go visit them come back and tell me that they have so much enjoyed this visit, that they have really, really had a good time. They got some good insights, they had some laughs with the people, and took home some really good impressions, and really loved it, which unfortunately is not always the case when we're visiting the Maasai, especially when we visit them on the touristy routes, which is along the Ngorongoro crater and also in Ndutu area. There's a large area, the Ngorongoro conservation area, where there's a lot of Maasai living there. So you would see them driving around, herding their cattle on the side of the road. There would be a few villages set up along the road for people to visit, while you're driving by. I don't necessarily recommend stopping there and visiting those villages, because they are very much made up for tourists, so they're not very authentic, and you may have a spoiled experience visiting the Maasai on that site. However, We have just lately looked closer to some cultural visitations with Maasais on the west side of Mount Kilimanjaro. So if you look here on the very right on the map, there is an area on the west side of Kilimanjaro, about here, where you can visit some Maasai villages that are very, very authentic. So there are still villages that live like the Maasai live. They still have the youth herding the cattle, going out every day to find pasture for the livestock to feed on. You can see the village. You can visit the people in the village, etc., which is very authentic. It is a little bit away, so we typically spend a night there in a very authentic Maasai lodge. It's owned by the Maasai. It's run by the Maasai. And it's built the way a village would be built. And the people that work there are from the village. So they walk every day, a few kilometers, I think it's 6 or 7 kilometers, and to come and work at the lodge. And they will also join you in the evening for a campfire. They will offer a barbecue, share some meat with you of goats that they just slaughtered that day. So those are quite authentic cultural visits, and we invite you to see them, and because it's very interesting and very unique to see. So here's an impression of one of the Maasai lodges we typically use close to the village here on the west side of Mount Kilimanjaro. You can see the mountain from there, by the way. You see the west side of Mount Kilimanjaro from there, because it's right in that area. So quite neat. When people want to go into the Serengeti for a safari, they want to go and see the Great Migration. And people always ask me, when should I go in Serengeti to see the migration? And most people don't know that the migration is actually an event that happens all year long. So it happens in a circular pattern from January to December, and then it starts again in January, because the wildebeest that live there have formed a large herd. So nowadays, the most recent numbers of wildebeest is about 1.7 million wildebeest. A herd, or a mega herd in that case, needs to reach a certain number for them to start migrating. And the wildebeest in the Serengeti have long ago reached that number, and now they have started migrating, or back then they have started migrating, because what do? They're looking for pasture, they're looking for food, they're looking for water, and they look for the best areas to give birth to their calves and raise their calves. So that's really the reason why those animals migrate. And the Great Migration is the migration of the wildebeest mostly, and they are accompanied by some zebras. So while the wildebeest are about 1.7 million, zebras are about 200,000. So they're much less, but they're a very, very important part of the Great Migration. And I tell you a little bit more about that as well. So to show you what that is, I have a map here, and I will tell you what happens at what time of the year with the migration. As I told you, they're migrating all year long in a circular pattern. They never stop, they never start. This is what they do. So let's start in January, because it's the beginning of the year and it's easiest to just start there. So in January and February are supposed to be dry season months. So we typically have a small rain season in around November and December, where it rains a little bit, and it starts making the Serengeti green. So there's some grasses that start growing, some bushes that start making leaves, etc. But then nature has put in 2 months where it's typically dry and sunny, so the pasture can start growing. New seeds can make roots and anchor in the ground, and they can start growing. So those 2 months are typically kept to do that, and they are typically without rain. At that time, the migration is in the southern Serengeti and Ndutu area. Ndutu area is just outside of the Serengeti. It's the Ndutu Conservation Area, which is, by the way, the only area in Tanzania where you can actually go off-roading. Every other park or game reserve, you are not allowed to go off-road. Ndutu Conservation Area is the only area where you can go off-roading. And by the way, also the private concessions in the OKAVANGO Delta are also allowed for off-roading, not the public concessions, just the private concessions. Or in Tanzania, the Ndutu Conservation Area. So you can go off the road. If you see some lions, you know, some 100 meters away from the road, you can actually, the guide can take you off the road and go closer to the lions. Anyways, the migration will be down here in January, February, enjoying the sunshine after some rain, munching on some fresh grass, and the babies will be born. There's a 3-week period in January, February, where the wildebeest will give birth to their offspring, and one may be able to witness the calving of the wildebeest, and they produce sometimes up to 8,000 young wildebeest per day. So that's quite something to see. Lots of young animals. You have to be a little bit patient to find those wildebeest cows that are about to give birth. But you can actually see them. We saw some that had, you know, some little hoofs sticking out, etc., or a baby that was still wet, laying on the ground, and so on. So lots of young animals being born in January, February. Not just wildebeest, but you'll also see a lot of zebra foals, etc., in the area at that time of the year. So lots of young animals, and with the young comes a lot of predator action as well. So you'll find a lot of predators in January, February in the southern Serengeti and Ndutu. So that's where they are, January, February. Now, once the wildebeest are all born, they start migrating towards the western side. Late March, all of April and into early May, you will have the rain season. So after these couple days or a few days in January, February of sunshine and nice weather, now the big rains are coming, just in time to provide a lot of green grass for the newly born wildebeest and zebra babies and antelope babies to have enough grass to grow stronger and start migrating. So March, April, they will reside here a little bit northwest of the southern Serengeti, and then stay in this area, hang around here while it's raining. It's also the time where they're making new wildebeest. So the rutting season is starting in late March, and new wildebeest are made, and they are just all hanging around there. Rain season in Tanzania, absolutely not a time to travel. You don't want to go on safari in the rainy season. If you've seen some rain in Tanzania or in the Serengeti, you know that those roads are bad, and especially when it's raining. Many of those roads are closed during the rainy season. They're not passable. A lot of the camps, a lot of the lodges are closed during the rainy season because it's raining every day. You don't want to go in late March, all of April, or early May. So don't go on safari during that time. It's not going to be nice. Mid-May, late May, June, you can start going again. And the wildebeest at that time will be in the western corridor around the Grometi area. This is over here. So the babies are now a few months old, and everybody gets ready to migrate towards the north. So in June, they will be here in the western corridor and Grometi area, and they will have to cross over the Grometi River. The river is a fairly small river, but it has crocodiles in it. So that's the time when you may be able to see a Grometi River crossing over the river in about June in the western corridor and Grometi area here. Then, so it has stopped raining now. You know, the bush is turning more brown, grayish again. The grasses are drying out, etc. Now the wildebeest start moving northways up into the northern Serengeti. They will arrive here, so they'll spread out. June, July, they'll be spread out in the central Serengeti, and then they will make their way to the northwestern side of the Serengeti, up north, make their way up there. They're going towards the river because there's water there, and sometimes there will be some rain further north. So they're following those patterns in search of the grass, etc., and the water up there. July, August, September, October, the wildebeest will reside here in the northern Serengeti, and that would be the time where some of them would cross over the border and spill over into the Masai Mara. And you can see here, the size of the Masai Mara is a fraction of the size of the rest of the Serengeti. So, and you can imagine how many people are going to visit the Masai Mara from the Kenya side, because they're, they may be vacationing in Kenya. So they will be coming to the Masai Mara to see the wildebeest there. All like kind of, in the same area, lots of camps, lots of hotels, lots of cars on the Masai Mara. So it's a more relaxed way and a bigger area, bigger space, more space for the wildebeest to stretch out. And on this side, they cross over the Mara River, they will meander back and forth. You may be able to see multiple crossings, which are a lot more spectacular over the Mara River than they would be over the Grumeti, because the Mara River is a bigger river, and it has these steep banks, and it's just more adrenaline filled. Like you can see these big herds, and there's less crossing points for them because of the steep banks of the river. There are 10 crossing points along the Mara River here, where the wildebeest will cross every year. And it's actually the zebras that remember the crossing points. So if you're lucky to see a river crossing and you see the start of it, you will likely see some zebras at the front of the herd that tell the wildebeest, this is a good point, let's cross here, I remember this from last year. They are the brains of the herd. Where the wildebeest are a little bit scattered, zebras are the brains of the herd, and they remember, and they can see far, and they can make sure that this is a good point to cross. So lots more adrenaline driven, like these big herds where you can see, the wildebeest are coming to the crossing point, and wildebeest are like, oh, I don't know if I want to cross, I'll try. Oh, no, something is not right, I'm not going to cross. So they back up again. It can take sometimes hours for them to decide if they want to cross the river or not. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go back and they spread out over the plains again and try again tomorrow. So it is a little bit of luck to see the Mara crossing, but when you see it, it is super spectacular, because you can just feel the energy go from the first wildebeest that goes into the water, rippling through the herd and getting everybody ready and excited to cross over the river. If you're there at the beginning of the season, you'll see some crocodiles coming close and snatching up some wildebeest that may not be fast enough or have some misfortunes in the water. Once you get a little bit later in the year, August, September, you may not be able to experience that, because those crocs, they get a lot of chances to eat, and at the end of the river crossings, they are kind of full. Like you can see them big, blown up, laying on the banks or laying on a little island, just watching the wildebeest go by. So they may not be doing much anymore in August or September, but you may be able to see some crocodile action in July, when the wildebeest just get there. So that all happens in probably about 2 months until early October. The last wildebeest typically turn around and start migrating southways again towards the central Serengeti in mid-October. So up until about mid-October, you may be able to see the river crossings. They happen fairly frequently because wildebeest are very sensitive to moisture and rain. So if they see it rain a little bit more in the north, they will cross the river towards the north. They may come back because there may be a pocket of rain down here. So they are actually meandering back and forth over the river, and sometimes they go into Kenya and come back, and then they go into Kenya and they come back. So they're not just standing still for those 2 months. They are meandering through the area in search of good grass and fresh grass and something to eat for their offspring, and spend the time in this area until about mid-October, when they turn around. In November and December, we can find them in the central Serengeti here, where they just hang out, and you can see the sheer size of this herd, like those 1.7 million wildebeest spread out over the plains, and you can get a really good impression of how big that herd really is. So what is the best time to go and see them? Really, there's not really a bad time to see them. The only time where you really don't want to go and see them is April, late March, and early May, when it's raining. But all the other times, you will be able to see the migration in the Serengeti. Now, showing you where they are and what months, I want to show you this because what I want to point out here, the way we operate is, depending on what month you're going on safari in the Serengeti, I will situate you where the migration is. And I can do that because I am an independent tour operator, so I'm not dependent on any lodges or any camps that tell me I have to use their services, etc. I can use whichever camp, whichever lodge, whichever area I want to. And I want to put you in the area where you have the highest chances of seeing the Great Migration and what they do at the time. So if you want to go to on a safari, say in September, October, which is a very, very good time to go, I would situate you up here in the northern Serengeti, close to the Mara River, so you get the best chances of seeing a Mara River crossing. A lot of the big companies, a lot of the big outfits, they have lodges situated in the central Serengeti because that's the time, or that's the area where the migration spends most of the time, because they migrate through there twice a year and they stay there for 4 months of the year, about 4 months of the year. They will stay there. So that's the area where they will be most of the time. Now, that's why they put a lot of camps and a lot of lodges, etc., in the central Serengeti. And then they drive from here to the north for you to see the migration up here in August or September. Now that's a 2.5 hour drive spent just driving to find something. We don't do that. We want you to have your full day, your full experience to where the migration is at the time. So we will fly you up here into the northern Serengeti. There's an airstrip located up here, and then you will stay there for the 2 nights or 3 nights, however long you want to stay up there, for you to have the best chances of seeing the migration without wasting your time going back and forth to stay somewhere else. You will stay right there. Same as the story here in the southern Serengeti, January, February, and Ndutu area, where we will put you where the migration is. And we will pick camps that have a good chance of being very close to the migration. Of course, nature dictating, right? They don't always take the same paths, etc. But we will pick the camps that have had a good reputation of staying in the area where the migration is. That's the mobile tented camps that I explained in the last module last time. So we'll take those and we'll put you close to where the migration is, so we don't waste any time. We will also stay in the central Serengeti because there's a lot of other general wildlife to see. It's a beautiful area. It is a busy area, I want to say that. Honestly, there is quite a few cars in the central Serengeti because there's a lot of predators there. So a lot of people, a lot of concessions, a lot of vehicles in the central Serengeti, where you are more secluded, more intimate in the northern Serengeti, southern Serengeti, and Ndutu, and even the Grumeti area, Western Corridor, is not as busy as the central Serengeti here. So that's the Serengeti with the Great Migration and the areas where they will be at what time of the year. So that will give you a little bit of an indication what time you want to go on safari. So good times really to go is from January and February, and then take a break between rainy season, and then June all the way through December. You can actually go on safari to see the migration in the Serengeti. Okay. So that was the Northern Park Circuit with the Great Migration in the Serengeti with the Ngorongoro Crater and Tarangire Park. Oh, maybe one more word about the Tarangire Park is the Tarangire Park is very close to the Serengeti. Let's just go back 2 slides. Sorry about that. So the Tarangire Park is right here, so very close. Even though it looks far away, it's not that far away. From here, from the Ngorongoro Crater, driving to Tarangire is about a 2, maybe 2.5 hour drive, depending on how many stops you take. So not very far, and the road is good. It's a tarred road from the crater all the way to Tarangire, and Tarangire Park is actually very attractive in the dry season. So from mid-June all the way to December, where there's a bunch of elephants actually migrating into the park in the search of fresh water. The Tarangire River is the only reliable water source during the dry season. And all the elephants that are spread out around Tarangire during the wetter season, or when it's raining and they find water everywhere, in September and October, August as well, all the way into late November, they will migrate into Tarangire Park to get the water from the Tarangire River. And there have been sightings reported up to 300 elephants in a mega herd. So they typically live in groups of 30 to 50 elephants, but when they need to get to the water, you can see them kind of mingling together and staying at the river together. And that's big herds of elephants, 100, 200 elephants in one go. I have seen as many as 70 elephants. I have not seen the 100 herd, but I have seen 70 elephants all together, with some coming and some going, etc., and them spending time at the river, bathing and drinking the water, etc. So it's quite something to see. So when you go, or if you go in our fall time, September, October, I will definitely put the Tarangire Park in there. It's always an area with many elephants, more elephants than actually in the Serengeti, from a density point. But in September, October, it's the most elephants you would see in that area. All right, so moving on from the northern park circuit into the southern park circuit. As you can see on the map, that there are two parks that are part of the southern park circuit, and it's situated more in the southern part of the country. That's why we refer to it as the southern park circuit. So it is the Ruaha National Park and the Selous Game Reserve. Those two parks are considered off the beaten path because they are less visited than the northern park circuit. Those two parks would fall into the fly and safari category because they are further away from everything. So you would want to fly into those parks, stay at the camp there or at the lodge, whichever you choose, stay there for 3 or 4 nights, do your game safari, do your walking safari in the area, and then move on from that area to the next area. So it could be, you can combine the Ruaha and the Selous Game Reserve if you want to visit both of them, or you would maybe want to do a drive-in safari in the northern park circuit and then fly down to Ruaha or Selous and do a fly-in part in that area. You can do that. So those are those two areas we will do on a fly-in safari base. That area is priced in the mid-range and all the way up to luxury range because of its remote location and the fact that you typically will fly into this area. So what is different to the northern park circuit? First of all, the northern park circuit, mostly a drive-in safari. We can make it a fly-in safari if you don't have much time and you have, you want to see the northern Serengeti, but you also want to see Tarangire. We can fly you from spot to spot, but it is mostly done in a drive-in safari trip where you have your guide and your pop-up roof vehicle and your own little safari group, 2, 4, 6, 8 people or more. And then driving from park to park and from area to area. In the southern park circuit, we typically fly. So you fly in there, you have permanent tented camps or lodges, and all of them are located close to a body of water. Could be a lake, could be a river, but all of them you have some kind of water close by, and most of the time you can see the water from your quarters, so from your tent or from your cottage or from your room, depending on what kind of venue you chose. So that means you have some wildlife frequenting probably quite close to your quarters. Because we're doing this on a fly-in safari base, you have some downtime in that day. So typically, if you remember, a day on a fly-in safari starts early in the morning with a game drive, likely at 6 o'clock or something, and you get back to your lodge around 10 for a late breakfast or brunch or a snack, and then you have your lunchtime and you have some downtime in between because it's quite hot during the noon hours of the day. So you spend those days or that part of the day at the lodge or at your camp, And then you go out in the afternoon again, or you do a walking safari later in the day, or you skip the afternoon and you do a nighttime safari. But you do have some downtime during the day, and that time can be spent, say for instance, at the restaurant patio area where you can see some wildlife in the water close by, or you can sometimes even see them in front of your cottage, in front of your tent, and you can just sit there, read a book, have a drink, and watch what's going on around you. Maybe there's some hippos, maybe there's some crocodiles, maybe there's some elephant coming to the water, maybe there's a herd of antelope or something coming to the water, having a drink, or just hanging out or something like that. Also, those two parks have permanent water in them. So the Ruaha River has always water. The Rufiji River has always water. With the Rufiji River in Selous being the bigger river, which also allows for water-based safari. So if you're going to Selous Game Reserve, you do have the ability to do some water-based safari, so boating safari, Mokoro safari, that type of thing, in Selous. You do not have that in the Ruaha National Park because the Ruaha River is not big enough to sustain water-based safari. But you can safari along the river and see crocodiles, hippos, elephants come to the river, etc. Quite nice. And if you think about it, it is somewhat comparable with the OKAVANGO Delta in Botswana because it has that water component to it. The Northern Park Circuit does not have that. So the only rivers really in the Northern Park Circuit are the Mara River in the northern Serengeti, which is small compared to Rufiji or the Ruaha River, or the Tarangire River in Tarangire Park. None of these rivers allow for boating safari or anything like that, and they are also not permanent. So the Tarangire River dries out in stretches. There will always be some pools and some areas that have water, but it will not be flowing all year long. So those two rivers, Ruaha and Selous, those are permanent rivers, and they attract a lot of animals and also a lot of birds. So if you are into bird watching, those two parks will definitely be something that you would want to consider for some birding in Tanzania. Okay, so again, these the Southern Park Circuit is geared to the mid-range, high mid-range, and luxury range. So it is more expensive than the Northern Park Circuit, where we can offer tours at the economy, mid-range, and the luxury range as well in the Northern Park Circuit. So all three comfort levels can be done, and we can do a combination of all of them. We can also combine Botswana with the OKAVANGO Delta and CHOBE, maybe Victoria Falls, maybe a trip to Cape Town. I'll talk about those areas in a different module, and then ship you up to Tanzania and do your drive-in safari in Tanzania, fly-in safari in the Southern Park Circuit in Tanzania also. So all the components I'm telling you about here today and all the other modules, we can combine all of them and offer many of them in many different comfort levels. So just ask and give me all the information, and then I'll put it together for you. Anyways, let's move on. So these were the three main areas: OKAVANGO Delta in Botswana and CHOBE National Park in Botswana, then the Northern Park Circuit in Tanzania, and the Southern Park Circuit in Tanzania. Now, I do want to take a little bit of time and tell you about some smaller areas that I think are absolutely worthwhile mentioning because they can be combined with other parts, and they are nice areas to safari. And they may not be the main areas that you hear all the time about and that are very popular. These may be areas that are less talked about, but just as enjoyable. And this is the first part I want to talk to you about, and that is the safari areas in Uganda. I will cover Uganda and Rwanda in the next module. Uganda and Rwanda, including gorillas and chimps, and a little bit more about safari in those countries. Today, I want to just talk a little bit about the safari components. So in Uganda, you can do safari in three main areas. There's another area that can be safaried in, which is in the north here. I won't talk about it today because I haven't been there. And right now, it is somewhat hard to get there. It would take quite a bit of time, and it would take also probably some flying up there and make it. I'm not sure if it would make it desirable or not. But these areas that I'm going to talk about today are quite nice, and I've done them before twice, and I have to say I really, really enjoyed them. So Uganda, one park, probably the easiest accessible and most diverse park that you could visit in Uganda is Murchison Falls National Park here. Not too far from Kampala, about a 5-hour drive from Kampala. Often we stop on the way to see the Ziwa Rhino Sanctuary, which I will talk about next time. But then you come to Murchison Falls, and Murchison Falls has the Nile River running through it. And it makes actually a neat little waterfall in the area, which you can go and see in the area. But regarding wildlife safari, what you can see in Murchison Falls is pretty much a good array of African wildlife, like buffaloes, like giraffe. You can find in Murchison Falls the subspecies of the Rothschild giraffe, which is a very endangered giraffe species, only living in the natural habitat in Uganda and parts of Kenya. That's the only area where you will find the Rothschild giraffe, and they're very, very endangered. But you can find them in Murchison Falls National Park. You can also find Uganda kob there, and you can see the very, very endangered shoebill stork, which you see here up here in this picture. Very, very endangered, but the Murchison Falls National Park is a very good area where you have very good chances of seeing them. We saw 2 of them last time I went there, and you will find them in the swamps along the Nile River. So this makes the Murchison Falls National Park quite attractive because you can combine dry safari and water-based safari there. So there's a Nile cruise you can take where you have a boat ride from a ferry point all the way to the falls, and you can see elephants, hippos, crocodile. You can see birds along the way, and then you end up at the Murchison Falls, which is quite neat. It's about a 2-hour boat ride. If you take the boat back, if you don't want to climb the falls and be picked up by a car there, it's another hour coming back. So about a 2 to 3 hour boating safari on the Nile River, which is quite neat. And you can do the game drives on land in Murchison Falls. Very, very neat for birders, for people that are interested bird watching and want to see and learn more about birds. In the same area, there's also Budongo Forest, also very good for bird watching, and they also have chimpanzees there that can be tracked. It's not the best area to track chimpanzees, but one can track chimpanzees in Murchison as well. Another area is Queen Elizabeth National Park down here along the lake here. And this is an area where you can actually engage in some lion tracking with Uganda Wildlife Authorities. We can go on a game drive there, and I can get a permit for you to spend a morning with the lion researchers from Uganda Wildlife Authorities that use telemetry to find the lions. And with that special permit, you are actually allowed to go off tracking in Queen Elizabeth and get close to the lions and find them there and learn more about their behavior and what they've been doing during their research there. So that's something that we can do in Queen Elizabeth National Park. You heard me talk about tree climbing lions. We do have quite a few tree climbing lions in Queen Elizabeth National Park in the southern sector, which is called the Ishasha sector of Queen Elizabeth National Park, where you can find some tree climbing lions there as well. I have not seen them yet, but I also have to say I haven't spent a lot of time in the southern sector, so I just kind of transited through there and did a little game drive, but didn't spend, say, a whole day on a game safari there. So I wasn't lucky enough yet to find the tree climbing lions there, but you can find them there. Another area is the Lake Mburo National Park. It's here in the middle. It's a fairly small lake, but again, this is quite neat for some boating safari on the lake. Be out in the country. There's wildlife there, like there's some hippos, there's also the shoebel stork, but not as common. So it would be very, very lucky, and the weather has to be very specific to find the shoebel stork there, but it is there, so you could find it there as well. So those three areas are the areas where we would do game safari. And to be honest, I would not go to Uganda just because of the game safari. I would keep that part, that component of game safari, for Tanzania if you're in East Africa. However, if you are interested in exploring Uganda, and I'll talk about that more in the next module, those three areas are absolutely worthwhile spending some time at to do some game safari. Okay, and then oh yeah, we can also do some more cultural visits, etc., and see gorillas and chimps as well as rhinos, but I'll tell you about that next time. And then the last area for game safari, and again, not a main area for game safari, but something that you could do if you were exploring Namibia. So if you go to Namibia to see the country, see more than just game, and have a nice, really cool road trip through Namibia with some spectacular landscapes, very, very diverse wildlife and also landscapes, then Namibia is definitely the area to go. But there are three areas again that I would recommend to spend some time for game. And of course, that would be Etosha National Park with the most wildlife for the country. The main wildlife area to go on a game safari is Etosha National Park. We typically spend about 2 days to experience everything there. It's a very dry and arid area, but very much interesting, very interesting, because you have some wildlife there that you wouldn't find in East Africa, like, for instance, the oryx, like the greater kudus, like rhinos. There's plenty of rhinos in Etosha National Park, white rhino and black rhino that you can see in Etosha. You can see the big four in Namibia's Etosha National Park, not the fifth one, which is buffalo. You can only find them in the Capri Strip up in the north. You will not find buffalo in Etosha. And if you are up for a bit of more of adventure and are really into rhinos, then we can recommend the Kunini South, or also known as the Damaraland, here in this area of Namibia, where you can actually go track a black rhino in its natural habitat. It is a day-long excursion, 3/4 of a day to a day, because they are very elusive and sometimes it takes a while to find them. Typically, tracking of them on foot is a few kilometers, maybe an hour to 2 hours, tracking them on ground walking until you get close to them. They are solitary animals, so don't expect to find more than two. You see two only if you find a cow with a calf. That's the only time when you would find two rhinos together. Other than that, they're solitary animals. So you may only see one rhino if you go rhino tracking in Namibia. But this is the area where the black rhino is in its strongest numbers in its natural habitat. The area is protected by Save the Rhino Fund, which operates in Namibia, South Africa, and Botswana. And the Damaraland area is the most successful protection area of the black rhinos. There has not been, until before COVID-19, I am not sure of the numbers right now, right this moment, but until February this year, there were we didn't have a single rhino poached in 2 years. So very successful, very well protected, and something really unique to see. Very rough landscape, just really different, different than East Africa, different than the Capri Strip, and anything you may have seen until now. So really, really quite something. And then the Capri Strip is the absolute opposite of both of these, Etosha and Kunene, because what is different, there's permanent water there. So remember us talking about the OKAVANGO Delta? The OKAVANGO Delta is in around this area. So all this area up here, the Capri Strip, has some permanent rivers. It's the CHOBE River, which is coming through Namibia and then emptying out into Botswana here. Sorry, here. It's the Zambezi River on this side. It's covered by this picture here, but it's also the Kwando and Linyanti River that I spoke about earlier. So there's 5 different rivers that offer permanent water, which changes everything. Water is life, so it changes everything. You have hippos there, crocodile, elephants in big numbers. Numbers of wildlife are greater than they would be in and around the deserty area around here. So much more animals there, and you find buffalo there as well. So that's the area where you could find the big 5 in Namibia. The water is just changing the landscape so much. It's much greener, it's much lusher, it's warmer up there, so everything different. So in all, Namibia is a very spectacular country to visit, and I will talk to you more about it and other opportunities of things that you can do in Namibia on one of the future modules. So this was game safaris. When we go on game safari, you want to take something home. Take home your memories. Leave everything intact when you're over there, but take home your memories. And I love this slide. I just wanted to show you because you know, it is for me, it's so important to impress upon the youth and upon the generations coming after us to ensure that this world is protected. And here you see my son. We were in Namibia in 2014, and he met this guide. His name is Gabriel, and he was chatting in his own words, I guess, at the time to Gabriel. And then we went to Tanzania in 2018, and here he met the guide Nerik, and he had many more words at that time for him. And I just love this slide, and you know, to have our youth and our people here fall in love with Africa, because there's so much there to experience, and it just makes for a widened horizon, for more understanding, for better understanding of the people and the wildlife, and just, you know, finding something that you see worthwhile protecting. So I think that's a very important part of my work, and I hope that you will be able to see it. Right now, I know it's not the time, but really, I hope in the future we will get back there. Right now, for me, all I can do is wave at you from behind the screen, and I hope you are well. I hope you stay distanced. I hope, you know, I will meet you sometimes in person. I will definitely make plans to come for a presentation in your area, and maybe I'll shake your hand, maybe I won't, maybe this will all change the way we greet each other, maybe we tap an elbow or tap a foot or something, or maybe just nod at each other and say hello. I'd love to do that in person, not just from behind the screen. But until we can do this, I hope you enjoy the modules. Next time we will talk about Uganda and Rwanda. And I'm particularly excited to tell you more about Uganda, because it's a fabulous country. It's wonderful. It's so worthwhile visiting there for so many reasons. And I will give you some of these reasons next time. So for now, I will unshare my screen and get you back on I think I'm back. Hi. So get you back here. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned more about the different areas. I hope you found an area that captures your interest and that you would love to visit at some time. And please send me any questions that you may have. Send me any suggestions that you want me to talk about, or if you want to get started on planning a trip. There are more modules to come for some other things you can do in Africa. If the only thing you want to do in Africa is game safari, you'll have a pretty good idea now what you can do and where you can go. If you are up to some more experiences, rather than just game drive, stay put for a bit and watch the other modules, because we have many more things to do and experience. But I do understand that not everybody has the time to combine a lot of things. Game safari is typically about 14 days. So if that's all the time you have, then we will make it the best time you will be able to experience. So I will customize everything for you. I will take your considerations, or your circumstances into consideration, and build you the best safari tour to my abilities and to your circumstances, be it time frame, budget, interest, anything like that. So send me an email if you want to get started on looking at something. Now is not yet quite the time to book, but we can definitely look at planning, look at tossing some ideas around, create your itinerary, get you excited, and then when we're ready to book, then we're ready to book. And I hope it's going to be sometimes later this year. Europe seems to kind of get to the end of it. And I know of some countries in Europe that are opening borders again. We're not there yet, by far. Africa is not there yet, even though COVID numbers are small in Africa. We still don't know why, if it's truly the number of cases or if it's just a lack of reporting. We don't know. So we don't want to jump the gun. We don't want to go forge ahead too fast. That's not the time to do that right now. Right now, we need to sit tight. Right now, we need to keep our distance, keep the neighborhood and family and friends safe, and spend our time planning, decorating, having a good time with friends and family, or family, I guess. And then we'll move forward when the time comes, and we will be ready. Anyways, again, have a have a great Easter, and I hope to see you again next week when we talk about Uganda and Rwanda. Enjoy your Easter, and I say goodbye for now.